Welcome to Making Space For, the podcast where we embark on a journey to simplify, organize, and prioritize our lives. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and each episode will explore the art of intentional living, helping you make room for what truly matters. In a world filled with constant noise and distractions, it's easy to find ourselves surrounded by things that don't contribute to our happiness or well-being. Making Space For is your guide to decluttering not just your physical space, but also your mind and soul. We'll dive into practical tips on downsizing, right-sizing, and the transformative power of letting go. Whether you're starting a cluttered closet, pondering legacy planning, or seeking the elusive balance between work and self-care, this podcast is your sanctuary for inspiration and actionable insights. Join us as we feature experts, share personal stories, and explore the profound impact of intentional living. Together, we'll navigate the journey towards a simpler, more fulfilling life. One where you have more of what matters and less of what doesn't. So are you ready to make space for the life you've always wanted? Let's dive in. This is Making Space For. Well, before we dive into today's episode, a quick shout out to our flagship company, A Move Handled with Care. As Denver Metro's premier senior and specialty move management expert since 2007, we've mastered the art of downsizing, right-sizing, organizing, and every step in between. From packing and moving to unpacking and staging, our experienced staff represent all stages of life, offering a compassionate touch to what matters most to you. So, if you're looking to make a seamless transition while keeping what truly matters in focus, trust A Move Handled with Care. Visit us at amovehandledwithcare.com or on Facebook or LinkedIn to discover the difference. Let's continue making space for the life you deserve. Welcome back to the Making Space For podcast. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and today we're making space for smart estate planning and future-focused legal strategies with Colton Craft from Davis Schilken Law. With over 35 years of experience, their team is dedicated to guiding individuals and families through estate planning, trust settlement, business planning, and more, all with professionalism, innovation, and care. Colton brings his experience in wills, trust, and advanced planning to help us understand how to protect our assets, plan for the unexpected, and create a lasting legacy. Whether you're thinking about your own future or helping a loved one navigate these decisions, this conversation is for you. This is Making Space For Estate Planning.
Okay.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well.
I'm sick of the snow.
I like snow personally.
Oh, man. We're in the moving industry, so I hate it.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah,
the whole
that'll do
situation.
it. See, and I commute 50, 60 miles every day, so I can get tired of the snow.
Oh, wow.
But I personally love it.
Oh.
My wife is not a fan.
No, I'm over it. But it's only January.
I know.
This probably won't air for a couple months, so by then, hopefully, by the time it airs, it will be better weather here in the Denver area.
Yeah. Although we live in Colorado, so
I know. You never
March, April, May, June sometimes. You never know.
Totally. Well, I'm glad that you were able to join us today because,
thanks for having me.
we've crossed paths a lot of times, your colleagues, your law firm as a total. And it's been great to learn along the way with a lot of our vendors and things like that about things that we're missing even, holes that our clients may not know about, things that, where you come into play. So tell us a little bit about who you are, who you work for, kind of what that looks like.
Okay, who I am. That's a big question. So my name's Colton. I am an estate planning attorney in Denver with a firm by the name of Davis Schilken. We've been around for 30 plus years. I'm a Colorado native. Currently, I live in Colorado Springs, but I'm from North Denver, from Thornton. So anyone that is from Colorado knows where Thornton is. I'm an attorney. Been an attorney. I'm going on my sixth year, one of those two. Formerly, before I was an estate planner, I was an associate district attorney in El Paso County.
Oh, wow.
So I worked there for a year and a half, and then shortly after made the jump to where I'm at now.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about, because that's what you do. That law firm specializes in estate planning.
That's all we do.
Okay. So I guess for those who may not know what that means, what is estate planning? What is estate planning law? Why do you need one? All the things.
So I think, when people hear the word estate planning, they automatically think about death and dying. And that's not all we do, right? We plan for life. But estate planning can really be broken down into two different branches, right? Planning and administration. So estate planning, we try to help clients get their effects in order, were the unspeakable to happen, whether that's death or incapacity. Make sure they have what they want, going to whom they want, where they want, when they want, how they want. That's always our ultimate goal, is to think about clients first and really think about what legacy they want to leave for their family. And then the flip side of that, like I said, is the administration phase. And that is, what happens if somebody does lose a loved one? What's next? How do we get someone from point A to point Z and work with them all the way in between to make sure mistakes aren't being made, objectives and goals are being met, and making sure it's as stressless as possible.
I would say, and maybe even a belief that I had, was that estate planning is for something you do when you're old, and only when you're older.
Sure.
I'm learning not the case.
Nope.
Because this can happen at any time, incapacitation or, the death or something like that can happen at any time. So who's an ideal client? And I guess if you could have your speech, we always say when you have time, you have options. If you could have your speech on what would that look like, who's coming in the door at the best time?
So
twofold.
I tell everybody, anyone and everyone, right? Everyone should have an estate plan. A lot of people think, well, I don't have anything. I'm not worth a lot. That is not what it's about. Like I said, it's about having what you want, go to whom you want, when you want, how you want, right? Anyone is a good candidate for estate planning. Now, that can be broken down in a couple different ways, whether it's the question of what is your average client, right? That's a separate question, because if I'm being asked that question, our average client, if we're looking at our statistics, is probably someone between the age of 55 and 65, has a family, retirement, is on the verge of retirement and just wants to get their stuff in order. But that's not who the perfect candidate for estate planning is. It's anybody, right? Do you have stuff and things you want to go to, people and places?
Yeah.
One of our big focuses right now is getting young families involved. Like you said, anything can happen at any time. I'm 32. I'm going to live forever. Yeah. That's not the case, right? Yeah. We know that's not the case. Unfortunately, the news can be very depressing. We see things happen all the time, and we just want to make sure that people are planned for when those things happen, right? Like I said, I'm 32. That doesn't mean something can't happen to me tomorrow. I commute 60 miles.
Right.
Anything can happen. I've been in 2 car accidents on my commute, and you know what? Fortunately, I'm here. I'm okay, but stuff happens every single day, and it's just about making sure that, hey, if that does happen, are you ready? Are you prepared? Is your family prepared? Because I can tell you, the stress of losing a loved one, combined with the stress of dealing with the court process, if you have to go through the court process and go through the probate process, is not an easy one, right? People are typically focused on, I lost a loved one, what do I do next? And they're not oftentimes thinking about the legal side of things, which can just bring in a whole different type of stress to your life. So to answer your question a very long way, anyone is a good candidate. We don't like to turn anybody away that's looking for any sort of estate planning, whether it's setting up wills, trusts, powers of attorney, whatever it might be. We try to just make sure people are prepared in the moment.
Well, and then state by state, that can change. And I've learned some things along the way, too, about the state of Colorado specifically, that we are a probate state. Is that correct?
Every state's a probate state.
Okay, every state's a probate state.
I think what you've probably heard is Colorado is a friendly probate state. Okay. In that our probate process isn't, I don't want to say it's not inherently difficult, because to the average person it is, right? As I tell people, Colorado is a friendly probate state. I don't know if you've dealt with the probate process.
I personally know.
Right. I mean, are your parents alive?
Yes.
As I tell people, your first experience dealing with probate, if we're dealing with just a will, is not going to be until mom and dad pass, unfortunately.
So let's back up a second, because that word, I'm not sure everybody knows what probate is. Yes. What is probate?
So I tell people probate is the legal process to prove that a person had a thing, and it goes to a person, place, or thing.
Okay.
At a 30,000-foot level, if I'm in the plane flying over the flyover states looking at Colorado, I can see all kinds of things. That's what probate is from way up top, right? It's just, I have a thing when I passed. It goes to a person, place, or thing. But it's a legal process to prove. So probate is a Latin term. It's and what it means is the legal process to prove that a person had a thing, and it goes to a person, place, or thing. In theory, that's all it is.
Okay.
Right? But when you get into brass tacks, it's a lot more complicated than that.
Right. So they can freeze assets, they can, and by they, it's the legal process.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to mention is who is they?
Yeah,
right?
Who is they?
What does it mean by freezing assets, right? So when we break it down, the probate process, probate estate planning, we're really talking about 3 different areas of the law, right? We're talking about the probate code, which is Title 15 of the revised statutes. We're we're talking about contract law, and we're talking about property law, right? They all come together when it comes to your estate planning. So it can be multiple different things. When you talk about freezing assets, is that an institution where your assets are held, right? Is it somewhere like Empower where my retirement is at? Is it Chase Bank? Is it Wells Fargo?
Right. Which may have other rules.
They may have other rules, and I will tell you they all do.
Yes, they all do.
They all do,
Yep.
yeah.
And you help navigate that piece as well.
Yeah.
So that piece is wherever the money sits, wherever the asset sits, you will help navigate whatever the rules and regulations are in those different institutions.
Yeah, because like you said, it's completely different.
Yeah.
Right? So what we need to really realize is it's two different paths, right? Dealing with institutions is one thing. Dealing with probate is a completely separate thing.
Right.
Probate is the state process, right? Every state has a probate code. The probate code is very different in every single state, right? So Colorado.
Is it time consuming?
Oh, yeah.
So is there an average in the state of Colorado? Because I guess it matters maybe by state, or maybe it's situational. Is it situational?
Yeah, so
by
I would say
person?
it's situational, right?
Okay.
Your average probate process is going to be different than mine
Okay.
because I'm a professional in that space and I know what to do and what's
So
next,
it's going
right?
to be faster, is what
It's
you're
going to
saying.
be quicker. It's going to be easier, and I'm
Okay.
going to take on the stress for you, which is why I'm losing my hair.
Right.
I wear the stress for other people.
Okay.
In probate, in the state of Colorado, probate has to be open for a certain period of time. It has to be open for a minimum of 6 months and then a maximum of 36 months. Now, that doesn't mean that things can't be accomplished. But what that means is as soon as you get what are called letters testamentary, and we don't have to get too technical, but as soon as you get authorization from the court says, Paige, yes, you are your mother's personal representative. And for people that don't know what that means, you guys hear the word executor, it's the same thing. Right? They're synonymous. At the moment you get authorization from the court saying, Paige, you are the personal representative, at that moment starts a clock, right?
Okay.
And from that moment, you have 6 months until you can close the estate. And again, that doesn't mean things can't be done. That doesn't mean I can't sell houses, move assets. That's not what that means. It just means I can't close the court case for 6 months to the day, right?
Okay.
That also means it can't be open for longer than 36 months, right? So
it's got to be buttoned up by then.
In theory, yeah. And there are certainly cases where it doesn't get buttoned up in 36 months, and, we don't have to go into that, but in theory, yes.
Okay.
Our average time we try to get a client through probate is between 8 and 12 months, right? And we try to get the bulk of it done as quickly as we can, so we're kind of waiting, which is a decent space to be in. But it's hard to say what is the average, right? Because, like I said, Paige's average is going to be different than Colton's. And that's no knock on Paige. It's I know what I'm doing.
Sure.
Right.
Well, and then the other thing, that I'm learning along the way too is that a will and a trust are different.
Two very different things.
And that matters.
It matters a lot.
And I think I'll be the first to admit that I probably am not prepared in that space, thinking that, I didn't have a will. My husband and I got married. We didn't have a will. We got pregnant, and we were like, oh, we probably should have a will. Like, who's going to get these
children? That sounds like the normal story.
Right. Of the uneducated story. So that is as far, and we wrote our will, let's be honest, when my son was 2?
Normal.
So he's going to be 12.
Do we have another kid?
No, that's my second one. So it was written after he was.
Okay.
So it
Great.
is, both my kids are in there.
Yeah.
Let's go back and look now. But I mean, all of it to say, it's been 10 years and all I have is a will. Since then, life's changed. I've bought a business.
Right.
That's very complicated. I basically in a separate marriage with Sierra.
Right.
And
She a good partner?
Oh, she's great. But, and I always tell her my husband would be a nightmare. So I've told her all of the things. Like, you would help him figure out what to do.
That's funny. Not to get too morbid, because, I did the stuff for my parents, and I tell them all the time, Dad, I hope you go first. Because Mom's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Mom's fine. She knows where everything is, how everything's done.
My husband is screwed.
Mom, if you die, Dad's screwed. I'm selling everything. He's moving in with me because I'm not going to deal with the stress of it, right?
Exactly.
And I guess to back up a little bit, you have a will.
Yes.
You're not dead. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing has happened.
But let's talk about the difference between a will and a trust, because that's been the biggest aha moment for me in the last year, that I'm like, well, I need to get my life together.
So to start out, trust planning is it's very different than will planning. Now, a lot of people used to think, 20, 30 years ago, trust planning was about how much you had. That's just not the case anymore. Right? We can set up a trust plan for everybody. We usually try to delineate will planning and trust planning by the 3 Ps: price, privacy, probate, right? Price, trust planning costs more than will planning. And we don't have to get into that, but it does. It's far more nuanced. You can plan better.
Yeah.
But it flows into the other 2 Ps, privacy and probate, right? Privacy, most people don't realize that a will becomes a public document when you pass. It has to be lodged in the county in which you reside. So I assume you're around here, you live in Douglas, Arapahoe.
Yep.
One of
Douglas,
the two.
yep.
Douglas. So
Yep.
your will would have to be lodged in Douglas County.
Okay.
You know, I told you I used to be a district attorney, so I could walk up to court every day. My docket was outside my courtroom every single day, so I could see who was in for what. We live in the age of the internet. It is all online. And so is the probate docket, right? So I can look up San Bernardino County, California, Delaware County, Ohio, Bexar County, Texas, Arapahoe County, Colorado. I can see who died, and then I can see with what. And then I can contest it.
Okay.
Now, I have to prove that my claim is valid.
Sure.
But what did we say 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago? Oftentimes, who are our fiduciaries usually, right? If you were
it's
drafting
usually
your
a
will,
loved one.
right?
Yeah,
if
it's
you're drafting
usually,
your will today, who's your fiduciary? It's your husband.
It's my husband.
And in 10 years, it's going to be after your husband,
My
probably
children.
your kiddos.
Yeah.
Exactly. If they're
My daughter.
Your daughter, right? Like I said,
She's the firstborn adult daughter.
there's a reason mom is in charge.
I was
not
gonna say,
dad.
and that's why everybody has to have a firstborn adult daughter, because that's who takes care of things.
Wow, I'm the firstborn.
Is there a daughter?
Yeah.
Is she more responsible? Probably not.
It depends.
You're an attorney, so that's not fair.
Right.
That's
It's not fair. It depends on the phase. When I was
I'm the second-born daughter, and I probably would be more in charge, to be honest.
See,
I'm closer to it, but I think that's also,
You're closer to it. You're more exposed. My mother's very type A. Her family's very type A. We need to get this stuff done all the time. My dad is not. And they've both lost parents in the last 3 years. Like, everyone decided they needed to pass away. And I tell my family, I wish my mom was running my dad's side of the stuff. We'd be done. We'd be done.
Yeah.
Because when my mom's mom passed, it was done in a couple months. Because
Right.
she has 3 sisters.
And
All
I think the misnomer there too is that a trust is somebody with a lot of money, a
Right.
lot of assets, a lot of complications.
No.
And it's not the case.
No, and yeah, to backtrack to that, right? So we talked a little bit about privacy, but probate is the big one,
Yeah.
right? So probate, like I said, is the legal process to prove that a decedent owned a thing, and it goes to a person, place, or thing. A trust is an agreement. It's a contract with yourself, right? A trust follows the trust code. The trust code has been adopted. It's a federally adopted code. It's been adopted by all 50 states. It is the bulk of it is the same in every single state. A, trusts follow you wherever you go. B, it's a contract. C, it's an entity. It's an entity that
it stands
you set
alone.
up.
Yeah.
It's
okay. Like
somewhat.
an LLC of some sort.
And it's good you bring that up, because I typically analogize trusts with LLCs. Now they're different at their face,
Right.
but from a 30,000 foot view, they're entities.
Right.
And a trust is simply an entity that survives you, and it's an entity that can own things.
And it can also, it transcends, because if there's multiple members,
Right.
is that kind of where the,
So with a trust, there's 3 hats: the grantor, the trustee, the beneficiary. The grantor is the person or people that create the trust, right? So if Paige is doing it, the grantors are probably Paige and her husband. Trustees are the person or people that handle or manage a trust during life, disability, and death. During your life, it's probably going to be Paige and her husband, right? We control whatever we own. And then we have our beneficiaries, and our beneficiaries' interests vest upon death. Now, you can wear all 3 hats at the same time. You can be the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. The rule is you cannot be the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary. So that has to change at some point, right? And when does it change? Disability or death, your kid's interests vest.
right.
But you're right. It survives you.
It survives
It
you.
survives you. So
And
if
it
I
can
have
continue on
Yeah.
without you.
So there's-
versus
I'm not going to get into this because I barely understood it in law school. And if there's any law students listening, you're going to understand the words I'm going to say. There's something called the rule against perpetuities, which effectively, I'm not going to try to quote what the rule is, but things can't live on forever. Most states, or a lot of states, Colorado being one of them, have done away with the rule against perpetuities to say trust can live up to 1,000 years.
Okay.
So we've kind of just said, hey, maybe in 1,000 years we'll deal with it. We'll figure it out then. We're not going to worry about it right now. So your trust can live up to 1,000 years after you, as long as there's a trustee in place to handle, manage any assets. They can control it, make distributions, or liquidate assets, whatever it is they need to do within the trust.
Yeah.
So it can survive you, and that's one of the biggest benefits is because an entity owns things. I don't have to deal with the probate process, right? Because
that's the thing that was like light bulb for me.
Yeah.
Was like, so if you wanted to sell your home, and I think for clients of ours, that can be, so if you have to sell a home to be able to afford the care
Right.
to move or something like that,
Right.
That's the piece that people aren't understanding is so you can't sell that home as quickly unless it's in a trust, correct? Kind of like
when
it's
somebody passes away.
Yeah, to simplify it,
I mean,
guess.
in theory, the answer is yes. As always, as a lawyer, it depends.
Right. Of
If we're
course.
talking about the probate process, yeah, right? Because if I pass away and my will has to be lodged, I'm likely not going to get letters testamentary, or my fiduciary isn't going to get letters
Right.
testamentary for at least a week. I've seen it take 8 weeks.
Right.
right?
And let's say, and it could be an emergent situation. Yeah. You have to do whatever you have to do.
Right.
And so it allows that probate process to go quicker.
There is no probate.
Right. There is no probate.
There is no probate.
Correct.
Right. So I'll give you a story because I think with what we do, stories are always great.
Perfect.
I have a client that we're just wrapping stuff up, and that's not because there's just been a lot of stuff to it. Her father, she was 19 when she came into my office. Her father had just passed away of a sudden heart attack. Her mother passed away years ago, and her father had a will and a trust drafted but not signed.
The worst.
The worst. And her father was an engineer. He tinkered with everything, right? His house was in a state of disarray. He was good, right? He redid his basement, like 80% of it, and he did the woodworking. It was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. He had a rental property, a bunch of cars, things like that, but he didn't have a will or a trust. And she was 19, so I had to say, hey, you're not 21. You can't be a fiduciary. We need to find someone. Long story short, she picked her uncle on her mother's side, who she was very close with. But I had to tell her, like, hey, we don't have access to any funds of in your father's estate, so I hope you have some money saved up. And thankfully she did. Because she could pay the mortgage. We opened an estate, and I believe it was April, and we didn't get letters of testimony back for 9 weeks. So we were looking at the end of June before she had access to anything, right? And she was in my office once a week, scared, crying, and I had to say, hey, it's okay. We've contacted institutions. We've let the mortgage company know that dad passed. We're working on it, right? And usually institutions, I like to say they deal with death every day because
they have to.
They have to, right? When I pass away, I'm not going to be the only person that passes away that day. Now, some institutions are better with it than others.
I've heard.
Yeah.
Some of them that I patron.
Yeah,
I've heard.
Some are much better than others, and we won't get into that. We won't talk about the offenders. But the point is they know that clients die. Clients die all the time, and if we let them know, hey, someone's passed away, they're usually going to work with us. But my point is she didn't have, or the personal representative didn't have any power to do anything for 9 weeks, right?
And so you got to pay bills, the mortgage,
utilities are coming due, right?
Credit card bills are rolling in. I mean, the stuff has to still be paid,
right?
Yeah, and there's no money to access that. Yeah,
no, it's not easy. And if we're dealing with a trust, I don't want to do any of that.
Right.
Because an entity owns these assets. And
Correct.
I've named a
And
successor.
the entity can pay for said assets.
The entity can, but it's the trustee, right? If I'm Paige's trustee and she passes away, I can immediately go to the book and I have affidavits and I have certificates to say, I'm the trustee. Here's a death certificate. Paige has passed, right? Okay. I am the one in charge. I can do this immediately. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, again, depending on the institution, you're going to have good luck.
So this was something I heard, a little while ago. And so, of course, I told everybody I knew, especially my parents, my in-laws, like, you have to have a trust. A will isn't enough. A trust, I feel like we need to get there. And then, the other thing is that you can have a trust, but unless you put the things in the trust, it literally is nothing. So you have to physically make sure that it is, to your point, you've got to have the signature on it. You have to, you can have a trust, but if, let's say, you own multiple properties, if you don't put the properties in the trust, they're not in the trust. And so it's making sure that you're following the process and going through the process, which again is why, people who are like, oh, I can just do it on my own on LegalZoom. And it's like, no, there's people who walk you through this process because especially if you do have a lot of assets or you do have stuff that's a little bit more complicated, you will help them know how to do it, when to do it, what are the proper, pathways to get it done. And then at the end of the day, the signature is on there. It's locked and loaded. Yeah. And, the signature is one thing. It is. But you had said something, getting something online. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn as a professional, but YouTube is incredible, right? I can figure out how to fix my car, fix plumbing leaks in my house. My dad is a master electrician. I'm still going to call him if I have electrical issues in my house because I want a professional to be walking me through the things, right, to figure out what I'm not thinking about. So, one of two things. Number one, you can do these things online. I wouldn't recommend it because they are really boilerplate documents that don't plan for your circumstances specifically. So I want to say that. The other thing you brought up, and it's incredibly important, I tell everybody, this is perhaps more important than me drafting the document, and that is trust funding. Trust funding is just as important as trust planning because all the time I have seen clients roll in who've lost a loved one or we're just reviewing their stuff and they say, hey, we have this document, great, everything looks fine, what's in it? What do you mean? Right? Things need to be funded to the trust. Right. So that the plan works. They need to be held in the name of the trust. The trust needs to be listed as the beneficiary or as the owner, whether it's real property, taxable accounts, cash accounts, things like that. There are some exceptions, things that trust can't own
during their life or the life of the grantor, retirement, stuff like that. But the point remains is, yeah, things need to be funded to the trust.
Yeah.
Because if they're not, you're dealing with a probate, right?
Yeah.
We can absolutely have one foot in each camp in that we're dealing with the trust administration because a house is in the trust, or we're dealing with the probate because, mom or dad, they move jobs, they have a new retirement account in their second career, and they didn't list beneficiaries of it.
So you can have a trust and stuff that goes to probate. So like the only stuff that doesn't go to probate is what's in the trust, and then everything outside of that will go through probate.
So I wouldn't say everything. Because it comes back to those 3 areas of the law: real property, contract, and probate, right?
Okay.
So will planning works. I don't want to tell somebody will planning doesn't work. It absolutely does. Trust planning is just better.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons, and we don't have to get into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's better to have something at a basic level.
Absolutely.
And if that's a will, I mean, clearly that's how I feel right now. We have it at a basic level.
Fine.
Which, but there are other things. And my second podcast I ever did on this was talking about why choose a professional. And I didn't just mean in the move management business or the moving business as a whole. It's entirety for life. And so that's why every episode we've had somebody come on that has talked about a service that they provide. And the idea is to help jog or log a thought in your mind that says, if and when I need this, am I prepared to handle it myself? Is my spouse or my loved ones prepared to handle this on their own? And I think a lot of times the answer could be yes. And sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah, and it's okay.
And that's okay.
It's just wanting to know, or at least having the ability having access to know who to call or having the knowledge of.
And sometimes, financially you can't afford to have all the things. My
It's
God,
not
wouldn't
cheap.
we all, right? Like, you sit down and you play cards or Cards Against Humanity or whatever. It's like, would you rather have a chef or this? And it's like, I want it all. Like, I want a chef and a housekeeper. I want, somebody to run my errands and to be my,
do my laundry
and my part-time nanny. And that's the thing is you have to decide as you get older and more complicated with your life and things as you accumulate, what are you willing to take on and what are you not? And I would say in the legal space, for me, I'm learning more and more how much I don't know and what I feel like I need a professional when I don't know stuff.
Right.
Because I'm like, the amount of time and energy it's going to take me to learn what I need to know is not going to be helpful. And guess what? When I die, it's not my problem.
Right. And that's what a lot of people say.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people say. Hey, I don't care what happens when I'm dead.
And I'm like, but somebody's going to have to deal with it. And
right.
somebody's going to have, a lot of heartache because you didn't think about it or whatever. And sometimes stuff is pretty cut and dry, really easy and simple.
Can be.
Sometimes it's very complicated.
Yeah. And, when you use the word complicated, I think it's also important to know that the amount of money somebody has when they pass away is not what complicates an estate.
Correct.
Right? It's the cogs inside of their machine that complicate the estate. Right?
Where is that money?
Where is it?
How is it invested?
How is it owned?
Exactly.
How is it invested? Who's holding it? How is it titled? Right? As I tell people, like, look, we've had individuals come in that say, hey, I lost mom. We need some help with things. Right? And mom's got all of her assets in a retirement in her house. And if I have, just use big numbers here, a $10 million estate and all of it's wrapped up in retirement accounts and the rest of it's in a house, that's easy. But if I have a $10 million estate where someone's a small business owner, someone owns a rental property, they have retirements here, they move, change careers, they have retirement over here, they have brokerage accounts, vehicles, collectors, items, that's what complicates an estate, right? It is not just the amount of money you have alone that complicates an estate. And that's where really trust planning can help, because if I have things owned by this entity when I pass away, the entity controls. So one way that we like to describe the differences between will planning and trust planning is asset planning versus estate planning, right? There's always going to be changes to your life, right? You and I, we're kind of in the midst of the prime earning years of our life. There's a lot of change ahead, right? Whether it's marriage, exactly. Marriage, death, divorce, those are always the big ones, but other things can happen, right? Adoption's always one-offs and just other things, right?
Sure. Inheritance, success,
maybe your business takes off. That's going to change your life financially, but it's going to change the structure of your life as well. Now, if I can point someone to that and say, look, we can either asset plan and we can estate plan. And if we asset plan, every time your life changes, you're going to have to change everything, right? You get divorced. You have to change the beneficiaries on your retirement accounts, checking accounts, savings account. You have a new kid. You have to update them year in, year out. That's why HR is always coming at you every October, November to say, hey, do you have any do you have any changes? What's changed? Or we can avoid that, right? We can estate plan and we can have this vehicle, this trust where our assets are held, or at least our assets are the trust is the beneficiary of that asset to say, look, I only need to change one thing, right? I got divorced. I have another child. I inherited things, whatever it might be. I only have to change one thing, and that might be my trust document to say, and it's a living document, it's always going to change, but I only have to change that document itself to say, hey, we had another child. We have a grandchild. Our kids, one of our children got married. Unfortunately, my spouse and I are deciding to separate, or my spouse passed away, right? Whatever it might be, I only have to change that document. I don't have to sit there with the client and say, okay, what do you have and where is it? Because we got to change all of these now.
Yeah.
And guess what? I'm not going to do it for you because
You
I
have
don't,
to.
yeah, I don't
I
know
don't have
where
access to it.
I don't know where your money is.
Yeah.
Right?
Ugh,
And you
nightmare.
probably don't want to disclose that information to me, and that's okay. So you know what, Paige? It's on you. And I hope you do your homework.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is you can give a list of, all the homework you're supposed to do. And then it's on the person to do it. My in-laws just went through some things too, and they're like, yeah, but we need to go put all the things in there. I'm like, well, oh my God, put it in there.
Right.
You're doing the thing, like you just go put it in there. And so it's the tasks and the things that, you have to just, once it's set, and I wouldn't say it like you've mentioned multiple times, like it's not like you set it and forget it, but there is somebody managing it. You're going to reach out. You're going to ask, has anything changed? Do we need to update anything?
Right. And
so now somebody's keeping tabs. Because I'm not thinking about that
and
every year.
at our firm, we try to drip on our clients all the time. And, send letters, just little, hey, how are yous?
Right.
What's going on? Come see us. I get the question a lot of, okay, I've done this, now what?
Yeah.
And I'll say, hey, I'll probably see you in 5 years.
Yeah.
Life's probably not going to change a whole lot. Over time, it will.
Sure.
Especially if we're trust planning. But yeah, let's talk in 3 to 5 years.
Right.
If before that, great. If not, fine. But things are in place for the time being.
And when we have come in contact with, estate planning, fiduciaries, what have you, what we have seen on our side is when either things are not planned well, things have gone to probate, or they're planned so intricately that it's very complicated.
And it can be.
An example for us is there was a husband and wife. The wife passed away. Her children lived across seas.
You say her children.
Her children, yes. It was his and hers.
Blended family.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And so her children, her things belonged to her children.
Yeah.
They didn't belong to him.
Right.
And so we came in and we had to box inventory, into an excruciatingly painful process for the husband, bless his heart. But it was because the children lived across seas. They had to have an opportunity to come back and look at all the things.
They always do.
I mean, and there was amazing art. There was, she had some really amazing artifacts. Like she had some really cool stuff. And so it was also interesting because the estate had very clearly how we had to inventory, what it needed to look like. So we learned really quickly that, inventory is not created the same. It's very different based on the situation. One item had to go per, container, had to have a photo on the outside with all of its information.
Wow.
I mean, so the amount of time, but the problem is who paid for that service. So that was also another level of complication. But nevertheless, you can get very complicated and very detailed, which if that is you and you want that,
and some people do,
make sure that you have that allocated and that you want a specific professional service to be able to handle that.
Right.
Because the adult kids clearly couldn't. They lived across seas, and the husband.
And that's just one factor.
Right. And then the husband is, in his 80s, and he physically cannot. Right. So that's how we got, into that job. I mean, that's just one example of things we've got involved.
You're absolutely right. It's
yeah.
one example. And that sounds like, given the circumstances, that's best case scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Because number one, you're dealing with a blended family.
Yes.
And number two, you have children from a prior marriage that don't live here.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like there was animosity because
there could have been, but it
didn't
affect me, right? Because I had very clear marching orders as to what I was supposed to do. So it just is, you do what you do.
Right. And from our side of things, we don't always get that level of, I don't know how to say, we don't get that level of pleasure dealing with families.
Sure.
Death and money make people crazy.
Yes.
They do, unfortunately. And it's a very real scenario. It's a very real thing. It's a big thing to lose a loved one, especially in a blended family, right? Blended family planning is incredibly important because, like you said, we had beneficiaries that didn't live here, dad's old, things like that. And that's just one factor, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't plan your estate carefully and you are a blended family, who passes away first may drive the entire estate plan. And that's when we start talking about the complications of accidental inheritance, accidental disinheritance, and that's really what can cause rifts between families.
And inheritance of things that you don't want to inherit.
Nobody ever wants that stuff.
Well, it's not even that, but we've had situations in, assisted living or whatever, they pass away and now the stepdaughter inherited all of this stuff, and she's like, I don't want all of this stuff, but you have to deal with it because if not, that estate is now paying for an assisted living care apartment until, you know, you get rid of the stuff and move out.
Right.
And so we've gotten those calls in the past of like, you know, awkward, like, what do I do with the things? And again, you give me the marching orders and I'll go take care of it. And I think that's where, like, I didn't realize until over the last few years how closely related and intertwined your business can get with our business, how our business can get intertwined with your, and like all of my professionals that I work with. And I think that's been like where I've learned so much along the process. And that's why I created this whole podcast in general, is because I think there's holes in our knowledge. Like we just think, oh, we're going to get old and then we're going to do this.
At some point we're going to have to move our stuff.
And I'm like, some point, and I'm like, or I'm going to die I'm going to live in my house till I die. There's inherent issues when that happens too.
Sure.
Who's in charge of it? You know, is it a blended family? Like all the different things, and who are the professionals that can take over when other people don't have the resources?
No, and it's a good point to bring that up because, you know, as estate planning attorneys, we're the last people on the totem pole. Everyone has their financial advisor. They have their CPA. They have their realtors that they use. You know, they know somebody that's used a moving company, so on and so. We're the last in the totem pole. And I don't think people realize that until it gets to us, how intertwined we are with everything else. So we do estate planning and estate administration. We also do business planning because that's an arm of estate planning. Sure. People don't realize that once they're done with us, like, hey, I may need to speak to your CPA and I may need to speak to your financial advisor if you have one. And are you buying a house? I need to talk to your realtor. I need to talk to the title company. Are you moving things? Okay. Yeah. I got to talk to the moving company and say, hey, this is the stuff that can go. This is the stuff that cannot. Right. So when it comes to us as the estate planning attorneys, people just think, yeah, we got our will set up. It's all fine. It can be far more complicated. And you know, on the transverse of that, it doesn't have to be. No. It can be very straightforward.
And if it's planned well, I mean, ideally that's the goal, is to have everything planned well.
It's all it is planning.
It's just, you know, now I have all my people and I just go execute.
It's all it is planning, which is why I'm really glad who my mom is. She has driven me crazy throughout my life, I think, as moms do. She is so type A that everything's planned for her. And I can appreciate that, right? I don't have to deal with a lot of stuff when she goes. Yeah. She doesn't keep stuff. They get rid of it. They purge, which is awesome. I'm like, hey, Mom, I don't want that stuff. Ideal client. Yeah, she is. Yeah. My wife's parents, no. Yeah. Like, they hold on to everything. There's sentimental value to everything. And that's fine. Right. It's just at some point, like, hey, someone else is going to have to deal with that stuff.
Right, exactly.
And the stuff that you harbor value to is not something that someone else is going to harbor value to. But what I really mean to say with that is that's why it's important to speak to your professionals, whether it is, you know, your financial advisors say, this is what's important to me, to your attorneys, or even individuals like yourself that offer this service to say, these are the things that I want to be stored or moved safely, and these are for these people. And just make sure that someone else knows, because like I said, unfortunately, death and money make people crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always say like the first client acquisition for us is that first move, because typically if we are working with our senior population, they've had a great experience. So then we move them again into assisted living, and then we move them again into skilled nursing. And then, you know, unfortunately when they pass away, their family calls because they're like, I already have the full inventory, right? Like I've worked with them for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And I have the inventory from the first time I met them, you know, I have all the photos and all the things, you know, I can get it done quicker because I've been a part of the process. And I think that's why, you know, those adult kids call all the time, is because they're like, listen, you know it better than I do. Right. And so that's how we get involved. But
well, and just like you guys, it makes life easier. And, you know, when it comes to that, when it comes to losing somebody, that's really what it's about. Right?
And when you're grieving, I'm
going to let you grieve. Let me grieve. Let me handle the stress.
Right.
Let us help you handle the stress. We'll take care of it. That's, That's exactly, you know, like I said, you occupy a space that we do as well.
And efficiency. And I think that's the other thing, too, is especially, you know, people don't realize the longevity that can happen in the death and dying process of, you know, what does that look like? Or even incapacitation, where they are maybe not able to make those decisions for themselves. And so now you're making those tough decisions, but it's already written down, no problem. Like it's already written down. I already know the will and their expectations. So now I just have to execute. Right. And I think that's the other piece too, is that if it's done well, it's just a matter of execution. And then
that's what it is.
You and I get in there with the efficiency piece. Again, like, you know, the probate and you know this law, and you're going to get that 6 month or 36. You say 36 months?
36 weeks. 6 months to 36.
Yeah, I'm like, you're going to take that 36 and hopefully shrink it down to as close as I need as a family to get things rolling. Right. And you're going to know all the little caveats to like, well, do I have money and access to this? Well, you're like, well, yes, you do. So whereas sometimes you can feel panicked.
And most people do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's overwhelming.
Well, it is. And like I said, your first experience is usually mom and dad. Yeah. Right. That's plain and simple, right? Yeah. My best friend's a mechanic. I've fixed my car multiple times. He's helped me fix my car multiple times. You know, help me with this, that, and the other thing. My parents are alive. Most people are in that scenario to say, I don't know what to do, and I'm not going to know what to do until I turn 50, 60, sometimes 70, right? Until mom and dad go. So it's just a complete shock, and they say, I don't know what to do or how to do it, or I don't know where to look. I don't know what step to take.
Totally. And I will say the other question I know, question I get all the time is, well, how much does this cost?
Yeah.
And there's no number. I already know that before asking you.
Yeah.
There isn't a number because it's more than likely based on a lot of factors.
It's completely circumstantial.
But is there something like if they came to you and you have like a brief look at it, do you give them a ballpark? This is what it's going to cost. Will, trust,
yeah, so,
all the different avenues.
Like I said, I work at a firm by the name of Davis Schilken here in Denver. We do not do the billable hour. We don't.
Okay.
We do fixed fee pricing only, and we think that fits our clients better because it's transparent. I can meet with a family, meet with clients for usually 1 to 3 hours, and within that time, I already have something in my head. Okay, this is what I know about you guys. This is what your family's like. This is how we want to plan. This is what it's going to cost you. Right?
Great.
I'm not going to sit there and say, okay, well, let's come back in a couple weeks when I have everything drafted. I'm going to surprise you with the bill then. That's not how we operate. It's a lot easier for our clients to swallow when they know what it's going to cost, whether that is planning or administration when they lose a loved one. Same thing, right? We do an inventory, look at the assets, what's where, who's holding, what institutions are holding what. Are these assets held in trust? I know the work it's going to take to get there and how long it's going to take, so we try to always stick to a fixed fee.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, and then again, you feel like even if it's not something you can afford today, it's maybe now something that you're planning towards.
Yeah.
And, okay, well, I need to get my ducks in a row. This is the number. And then they can come back and get that done. Yeah.
Always. And, especially
young people, I think.
Yeah.
Because, again, we're living forever. So
Absolutely.
we got a lot of time to save up. But at
Right.
least you then know. And I think anybody who, especially young, who have children, who have maybe complicated family situations, own a business,
or health issues,
or health issues, or whatever that might be. I mean, we don't. I think we're probably the most underserved is the young people. And the more complicated your life gets, the more complicated you're leaving that behind.
And it gets complicated quick.
Yes, very complicated. I mean, just buying a business. I went to a seminar. I went to a seminar once, and I came out, and Sierra goes, "What is wrong with you?" And I was like, man, I just got
didn't
scared.
even know what I
just
didn't
got
know.
scared to death. And she's like, why? I'm like, you can never die.
Yeah, no, and that's
and I'm like,
right.
You can never die because
it's
so complicated and we're not set up for success. But now we know who. And sometimes you can't, and even in a small business, you can't afford it maybe all at once.
Right.
But you just slowly chip away at the things that you need to do. And I will say we've done a lot in the last 3 years to get things better. Because this when it's just you only have one person in a partnership, or if you sell your business, or if maybe you're put on as a silent partner, or you're on whatever that might look like, it just can change. And so just knowing how to get yourself set up for success.
And the financial burden is one thing. Look, I understand it. I know what space I occupy. Attorneys aren't cheap. We know that.
Yeah.
We know that, right? You go to school for a very long time to become an attorney, and you read too much, you get headaches, you lose your hair, things like that. I get it. But as I always tell people, the best thing you can do is at least start the conversation and talk to somebody about it. Because if not, you're back to where you were, right? You've moved no further ahead.
Yeah.
So I've had, we've always have clients come in and just talk to us, and we don't charge for consultations or anything, but just say, hey, what is this going to cost me? What do I need to do? And we'll give them that advice and say, okay, we're not ready yet, and we get a call 6 months later, and now's the time.
Yeah.
Right. So, like I said, the worst thing you can do is the worst thing you can possibly do is ask for information because. Or, the best thing you can do is ask for information because if you don't, then you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, last thing, what's the question I haven't asked that you think people should know about estate planning?
I don't know. You did a good job. Ask the questions that you need. I don't know that I have one. I think we covered most of the bases. It's kind of hard to say, give you an answer to a question that I'm not sure what you're thinking.
No, I think more than anything, it's just, there's so much, like I said, in this industry that working with older adults and not even that, but just who becomes, like, I didn't know about estate planning until somebody called us and said, we need for you to do a full photo inventory and and then you start learning that process. And then we start meeting estate planners, and then we start, like, you don't know how intertwined it all is until all of a sudden you have an experience. And so I think for me, it's sharing this knowledge with people who they don't even know the questions to ask. And so hopefully, there's one or two people listening that, this is the nugget that they're like, oh man, I need to get my life together in this way.
And, I guess the thing I would say about that is everyone should and needs an estate plan. I'm not going to live forever.
Yeah.
You're not going to. Unfortunately, right? There's 2 things guaranteed.
And
Death
I
taxes.
think I really want it to be a smooth transition for whoever that is.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be enough turmoil because it's complicated.
Right.
But I want there to be certain things that just feel like, oh, thank goodness mom thought about that.
Right. And I guess the only thing I can really say to that is estate planning and what we do, it is never about how much you have. It's simply just about how much you care.
Yeah.
When, how, why, where do you want to get your stuff? How do you want it to be held? Do you want rules and contingencies in place? Things like that. I mean, that's, a little bit more nuanced, but it's simply about how much do you care about what you have?
Yeah.
Do you want your stuff to go to the right people? Do you want your children, to your family to be taken care of? Do you want that stress removed as best as possible?
And for those who don't have that support system.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have I met people in my life who don't have a support system, who
Yeah.
don't really have anybody to leave it to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What happens to it?
Right.
What do you want to have happen to it? Is it donated? Is it to, some sort of charity of your choice? Like, if you don't say, it doesn't go.
Yeah, and that's another piece of it. That's also a sad reality, I suppose. Because there are those individuals that don't have anybody.
Right.
Whether something happens, spouse is gone, kids are gone, never had kids. It doesn't matter. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
Right. To be morbid about it, it's gonna happen. And
sure.
like you said, and like I have clients say, "What do I care? I'm dead." And
yeah.
that's how you want to plan. Look, fine. I'm not going to tell you what to do. And this may be somewhat insensitive, but as I tell clients, like, I don't care about what you do. That is not because I don't care about you. It's because I don't have the capacity to. I can only care as much as you do. And if I cared about what every single client of mine did, I would have a heart attack.
Sure.
The best thing I can do is sit and have the conversation with you, tell you what you should be caring about, and then have the discussion of this is how we get it to where you want it to be.
Right.
Right.
Well, and sometimes family isn't who it goes to, right? Like sometimes it's, that's estranged or it's, whatever. And so, or they don't have the best interest of me. So if I'm incapacitated, that's not the person taking care of me.
Right.
I want this person taking care of me and making those decisions. And I want the money to go here. And it sometimes skips a generation or it skips all entirety. And, and I think that's the other thing too, is like the plan doesn't have to be like the cookie cutter plan.
No. And that's
whatever
why
you want. So
that's why I say I don't
whatever.
care.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Because as I tell clients too, we don't do fair. We do what you want.
Yes.
And I don't care because it's your stuff.
Do
what you want with it.
So if you don't want to give it to your daughter,
by all means.
Yes,
if you want to give it to charity, I don't care. It's your stuff. It's not mine. I'm not going to tell you how to feel,
Yep.
And I've run into this recently where unfortunately someone was disinherited, and I had to have that conversation with, with the matriarch of the family. And I said, look, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge you. Everybody's circumstances are different.
Yep.
I would be lying if I said that the easiest clients and the client that walks in the door most often is the perfect family.
Mm-hmm.
That is an oddity in what I do.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's by and large because death and money make people crazy.
Yeah.
We have a few of those clients where everything works perfectly and everyone gets along and it's hunky dory. And sometimes that's odd. It's odd to occupy that space when I have to say, hey, this is okay, everything's fine.
And I also think too, I'm learning like the trickle down effect. So like maybe your stuff isn't very complicated, but maybe the stuff ahead of you is really complicated.
Yeah. Well, and that's
and like so what I'm going to inherit is going to be very complicated. So if I set my stuff up, when that funnels down, then it's I'm working my way that way.
Well, and it's a good thing you bring that up, right? People, financial advisors, CPAs, economists keep saying we're in the midst of the largest wealth transfer that's ever happened.
Right.
And we are. It's beginning. It's starting, and that is happening. Right.
The silver tsunami. Right. It's coming.
I mean, I have a client that I'm dealing with that she has been taking care of mom for the last couple of years. She works for the school district, doesn't have a whole lot, and mom's gone. And she, in my conversation with her, she said, I don't know what to do. I'm inheriting all this. I've never had this or never thought that I would have this, right? So that transition's beginning. But like you said, it's not just about your estate plan.
It's
what's trickling down. And that's one of our conversations with all of our clients, or one of the questions we always ask is, what do you expect to inherit?
Yeah.
Not because I want to know how much money you have. It's just, I need to know how to plan.
Well, and because when that triggering event happens,
that's a change.
You're like, hey, let's revisit.
That's a change in your life, right? Marriage, death, divorce. And it's not death of you, spouse, or a child. It could be mom, dad, brother, sister. We've all seen, I think a lot of people have seen the movie Mr. Deeds, the long lost uncle who had no beneficiary, right? It happens. And just like accidents happen. trying to plan properly, trying to be prepared for what's next.
Totally.
Whatever next might be, buying a business, somebody passing away, your business taking off, becoming incredibly successful, accidentally investing in something that takes off. I mean, it could be a whole host of things.
Yeah, we hope all of those things.
We hope all, you're going to win the lottery.
Yes. It's all going to happen.
You're going to win the lottery, and when you win the lottery, you're going to call us
I'll
to
call
say,
you and I'll be like, listen, all those things came true.
Yes,
Let's
exactly.
get our life together.
Exactly. Yeah, I wish everything worked out like that, and unfortunately it doesn't. And we're just here. We occupy a space to be prepared or help people prepare for when the thing happens, good or bad.
And not talking about it doesn't make it go away.
No, it doesn't. In fact, it makes it worse.
Exactly.
Makes
Talking
it far
about
worse.
it at least gets you the information, and then you get to make a choice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one last little story I'll tell you, and I may have mentioned this already, but when I helped my parents do their planning, I gave it to them as a Christmas gift, which is somewhat morbid, but my mom loved it. She's a planner, type A.
Yeah, I bet you she liked it.
Yeah, I said, Mom, this is your Christmas gift. I've done everything for you. You know, everything is 50-50, my sister and I, and my sister said, why do we have to talk about this? It's Christmas. And I said, you know what? When Mom and Dad go, it's not going to be a problem. And if you don't want to be a part of it, fine. I'll guarantee you that it's going to be easy. But I'm not going to stress about it because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Yep. And I don't want to be up a creek without a paddle worrying about where are things, where is stuff. I want it to be easy. I want us to be able to, grieve. I want us to be able to feel the emotion without having to worry about the stressors of what comes next. And that's what we try to do for families.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's a great gift, especially as we get older. My parents always joke and say, if you can't eat it or wear it, we don't want it.
Well, that's how my mom feels.
Or if you can't use it is where I'm maybe going to go too. It's like, those are the things that sometimes they need, but they don't do for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's that. I mean, while morbid, yeah. Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been so fun to, get to know your firm and all the people in it. You guys are amazing. I love every interaction we've had. And so we just look forward to a prosperous 2025 and continued relationship.
Yeah, you guys as well. I get a lot of questions. How do you do what you do all day? Talk about death. And it's not really talking about death. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Talk about life, what's next, for a lot of people.
How do I set you up for success?
How do I set you up for success? Things are on the horizon. There's a lot of life to be lived. I don't personally love the term life is short. It's not. Life is the longest possible human experience you could have.
Yeah.
Life is long. There's a lot of stuff that can happen between today and tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It may happen quick, but it's in itself, it's long. Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can happen, and we like to try and talk to clients about that is let's plan for your life. And in the untimely event something does happen, we're going to be ready.
Sure.
But what happens between now and then is what we really want to make sure everyone is prepared for.
Amazing. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Hopefully maybe the snow's melted a little bit.
Maybe. It will be by the time this airs.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That wraps up another inspiring episode of the Making Space for podcast. A huge thank you to our incredible guests and to you, our cherished listeners. Your journey to intentional living begins with each small step, and we're honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider liking, subscribing, and rating our podcast on your favorite platform. Before we part ways, a friendly reminder, if you're embarking on a move or seeking expert guidance in downsizing, remember a move handled with care in Denver. With over 15 years of experience in senior and specialty move management, we're here to transform your transition into a seamless, stress-free experience. Visit amovehandledwithcare.com for more information, and let's continue making space for the life you've always wanted. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep making space for what matters most.